This is a video guide to our depth of field assignment. Today we'll be shooting 3 sets of 3 photos, and each one of those sets will deal with one of the 3 factors that affect depth of field. The first will be adjusting our aperture. We'll keep our focal length the same and our distance the same. The next, we'll adjust our focal length. We'll set our aperture and we will set our distance, and we will adjust just the focal length of the lens. And in the final set, we'll have our aperture and our focal length fixed, and we'll change the distance to subject. So for this, we want a particular setup. We want a focus point in the foreground. We don't want like a foreground, a subject, and a background. We want a foreground subject we're going to focus on, and that should be on the right or the left side of the frame. We then want a background. We will then need something prominent in the background, so as we change our settings, we can see the depth of field decrease or increase. For this, you may need to change the focal point on your camera. On the back of the camera, press the button that has the plus magnifying glass icon on the upper right of the body. Then use the left navigation key to select a point on the left, or the right navigation key to select a point on the right, depending on which side your focus point is on. Then push the set key to make the selection. We'll start by changing our aperture. The first thing we're going to do is set it to the smallest aperture that lets in the lowest amount of light. We'll start with f16. Now, because f16 lets in very little light, to a 60th of a second, or 1/125th of a second, and then adjust the ISO up accordingly until you get a proper exposure. In this setup, we're going to have 2 fixed settings. We're going to be about 2 feet away from our focus point. We're going to have that in 1/3 of the frame on the right or the left, and then we'll have our background taking up the other 2/3. Our focal length is going to stay fixed at 24 millimeters. So we'll shoot one shot at f16, 2 feet from our subject at 24 millimeters. We'll then set the camera to f8. Now, when you change your camera to f8, you're going up 2 stops. You're letting in 4 times as much light, so you're going to adjust your shutter speed faster by 2 stops. Depending on if the light changes, that should work out mathematically. After you take that shot, set the camera to f4, adjust the shutter, and take a 3rd shot. All of these will be from the same distance with the same focal length. Here's an example of what you should see. The first shot is about 2 feet from the bush on the right, shot at f16. We then have a shot at f8. We can see the background start to go a little blurry on us. And our final shot at f4 has a very blurry background. Now, when I shot this, it was very overcast, so you should notice some grain from a high ISO. I had to shoot at 3200 for my settings to work. Once you have those 3 shots, our next group of shots, our next 3 shots are going to be adjusting the focal length. We're going to shoot at 55 millimeters, 35 millimeters, and 18 millimeters. In this shot, you want to step back a little bit. We'll be about 5 feet away from our subject, and we want to set our aperture to f5.6. The variable in this, again, will be the focal length, so fix distance, fix aperture, and in this case, since we're only changing the zoom of the lens, you shouldn't have to change your shutter speed. We'll shoot one shot at 55 millimeters. We'll then zoom in to 35 millimeters and take another shot. And then we'll zoom to 18 millimeters and take our final shot for this set. Here are 3 examples, shot at 55, 35, and 18. As we decrease our focal length, as we zoom out wider, we get more depth of field. Our final 3 shots will be changing our distance to the subject. We'll start very close at about 2 feet, step back to 5 feet, and then step back even farther to 10 feet. So, our fixed settings will be 55 millimeters on our focal length. Our aperture will be 5.6, and we'll start, like I said, about 5 feet from our subject. We'll take a shot, and then we'll scoot back to about 10 feet, take a second shot, scoot back even farther to about 15 feet, and take our 3rd and final shot for this assignment. So here is 2 feet from subject, This is about 10 feet from subject, and this is about 15 feet from subject. This assignment is designed to show you how each of the three factors work to change the depth of field in an image. Now, all of these can be combined. If I want to have a shallow depth of field, I could shoot very close at 55 millimeters with a very wide open aperture, and I will get a very shallow depth of field. In this assignment, we isolated the three factors so you can see how each of them impact your images. Your final step in this assignment is to follow the guidelines in the assignment in the module for submission to Google Drive and to Canvas.